She was 7 months pregnant, standing in her own home, holding divorce papers she had never asked for, with $342 in her bank account. Her husband was in a hotel suite across town with another woman. His mother had quietly purchased her attorney's law firm 6 weeks earlier. Her medical records had been requested without her consent. And the prenuptial agreement she had signed 8 years ago in good faith contained a single clause on page 47 that had just frozen every account with her name on it. She had nothing, except the one thing they had all forgotten about: her mind. Because before she was a wife, before she was a society hostess, before she learned to arrange flowers and manage caterers and smile at charity galas, Evelyn Hartwell was a federal litigation attorney who once made a hedge fund manager cry in a deposition. And the people who had spent 14 months dismantling her life were about to find out exactly who they had been dealing with. This is not a story about a woman who was destroyed. This is a story about a woman who waited until she understood the entire battlefield before she moved. Stay with us, because the moment she fights back will be the most satisfying thing you hear all week. Lesson statement. The most dangerous person in any room is not the loudest one. It is the one who has been quietly paying attention. Story value and meaning. This story is for every woman who has ever made herself smaller to fit inside someone else's life. For every person who has been counted out at the exact moment they were getting started. Evelyn's journey reminds us that losing everything on the outside does not mean losing yourself, and that the version of you that you set aside for someone else's comfort is still there, waiting, ready, and more capable than you remember. The real victory in this story is not the legal settlement or the collapsed empire. It is the moment Evelyn stopped reacting and started deciding. That moment is available to all of us, in our own lives, in our own ways, on our own Tuesday. If this story stayed with you, if any part of Evelyn's fight felt familiar, or if you simply love a story where the right person wins in the end, take 1 second right now and hit that like button. It costs you nothing, and it tells us that stories like this one matter to you. Drop a comment and tell us, at what moment did you know Evelyn was going to win? We read every single one. Share this with one person in your life who needs to hear a story about starting over and getting it right. You never know who is sitting in their own $342 moment and needs to be reminded that the Wednesday always comes. And if you are new here, subscribe to this channel and ring the notification bell, because we bring you stories like this one every week. Stories about real strength, real stakes, and the kind of endings that remind you why it is always worth fighting for yourself. We will see you in the next one.
The nursery smelled like fresh paint and lavender. Evelyn Hartwell stood in the doorway of the room she had spent 3 months designing, one hand resting on the doorframe, the other pressed flat against the curve of her 7-month belly. The walls were a soft sage green. The crib was white oak, ordered from a small craftsman in Vermont who had a 6-week waiting list. The mobile above it was made of tiny hand-painted wooden birds, each one a different species that actually lived in Connecticut: a cardinal, a blue jay, a chickadee, a small, fierce-looking hawk that the craftsman had thrown in as a bonus. She had chosen every single detail herself. Carter had said, during the one conversation about the nursery he had stayed present for, that she should just hire a decorator, that it would be easier, that she had enough on her plate. Evelyn had smiled and said she wanted to do it herself. What she had not said was that she needed to do it herself. That somewhere in the exhausting, nauseating, breathtaking experience of growing a human being, the nursery had become the one thing in her life that was entirely, uncomplicatedly hers. She was 34 years old. She had graduated second in her class at Georgetown Law. She had spent 4 years as a litigation associate at one of the most respected firms in New York, where she had made a partner-track hedge fund manager cry during a deposition over a real estate fraud case. She had been, by every professional measure, formidable. Then she had met Carter Hartwell at a charity auction, and somewhere between the champagne and the paddle raising, and the way he looked at her like she was the only person in a room full of beautiful people. She had made a choice. She had chosen him. She had chosen this life. The Connecticut estate, the charity boards, the careful, gracious management of a household that ran like a small corporation. She did not regret it. She wanted to be clear about that, even in her own internal accounting. She had loved Carter. She had loved the life they were building. She had simply, somewhere along the way, stopped being Evelyn the attorney and become Evelyn the wife. And the transition had been so gradual, so cushioned by comfort and affection and the genuine belief that she was happy, that she had not noticed how much of herself she had quietly set aside. Her phone buzzed on the windowsill. It was her best friend, Lauren. She answered on the second ring. "Tell me you're not reorganizing the nursery again," Lauren said, without preamble. "I'm not reorganizing. I'm evaluating." "Evelyn, the mobile has been moved 4 times. The light hits it differently at different times of day. I'm doing research." Lauren's laugh was loud and completely unself-conscious, the kind of laugh that startled strangers in restaurants. "You are a menace. How are you feeling?" Real answer, not the fine you give your mother-in-law. Evelyn smiled and lowered herself carefully into the rocking chair by the window. Outside, the October lawn was going gold at the edges, the maples along the drive just beginning to turn. Honestly, big and tired and weirdly peaceful, which I know sounds insane, given everything. Everything meaning the fact that your husband has been working late approximately 400 nights in a row? He's closing a deal. He's always closing a deal. Lauren, I know, not my marriage. A pause, and then more gently, I just miss you, the real you. The one who once filed a legal brief at 2 in the morning and then came over and ate an entire pizza with me while explaining why the opposing counsel was an idiot. Evelyn laughed, despite herself. I still think about that case. Come over this week. Bring your gigantic belly and your galaxy brain, and let me feed you something that isn't catered. Bishop. Deal, Evelyn said. She hung up and sat for a moment in the quiet, her hand moving in slow circles over her stomach. The baby shifted, a rolling, unmistakable presence that never failed to stop her breath. Hey, you, she said softly. We're going to be okay, whatever okay looks like. She didn't know then that she was already right. She didn't know that okay was going to look like defamatory she could have predicted. Her phone buzzed again. A text this time from Carter. Working late again. Don't wait up. Big day tomorrow. She read it twice, set the phone face down on the armrest of the rocking chair, looked at the cardinal on the mobile, some small, quiet, lawyer-trained part of her brain that she had been ignoring for months, filed the text away without comment. She went to bed alone. Carter came home at 2:17 in the morning. She knew because she heard the garage door. She did not get up. She lay in the dark and listened to the sounds of the house settling around her husband's return. The quiet footsteps, the sound of the bathroom door, the careful way he got into bed so as not to wake her. She was not asleep. She did not tell him that. In the morning, he was gone before she came downstairs. There was a note on the kitchen counter next to the coffee maker. It said, "Early call with London. Back for dinner." He had drawn a small heart at the bottom, the kind he had been drawing on notes since they were dating. A 2-stroke habit that used to make her feel chosen. She made her coffee. She drank it standing at the kitchen window, watching the morning light move across the lawn. She was not unhappy. She needed to be precise about that, even now, even knowing what she knows. She was simply, for the first time in a long time, paying attention. It was a Tuesday in late October when Evelyn found the receipt. She was not looking for it. That was the part she would return to later, the part that would seem almost cosmically arranged, as if some version of the universe had decided she had waited long enough. She was not searching through his pockets, not suspicious in any active or deliberate way. She was simply taking Carter's gray cashmere coat to the dry cleaner because he had asked her to, because the charity gala was on Saturday and he wanted it cleaned, and she was being a good and organized wife. And her hand went into the inside breast pocket to check for forgotten items, the way you always check before dry cleaning, and she pulled out a small cream-colored envelope. It was from Whitmore and Sons. She knew the name. Everyone in their social world knew the name. Whitmore and Sons was a private jeweler on East 73rd Street in Manhattan, the kind of place that did not have a window display, only an unmarked door and an appointment system and a reputation for discretion so total it bordered on clinical. Carter had bought her engagement ring there. She opened the envelope. The receipt was for a bracelet. Rose gold, set with alternating diamonds and emeralds. Custom order, hand engraved on the clasp. The engraving read, "Every Tuesday. Yours, C." The total was $42,000. Evelyn stood in the front hallway of her house for a very long moment. The coat was still in her hands. Outside, a car drove slowly past on the private drive, its tires making a soft sound on the damp asphalt. Her anniversary was in June. It was October. She thought, with the very front part of her brain, the part that was still trying to be reasonable. Maybe it was an early Christmas gift. Maybe it was something he had commissioned for her, and the engraving was a private joke she was not placing right now. Maybe every Tuesday meant something she was not currently remembering. The back part of her brain, the part that had once made a hedge fund manager cry, said nothing. It simply began, quietly and without drama, to work. She put the coat down on the hall bench. She went upstairs to Carter's home office. She knew his secondary email password because she had set up the account for him 3 years ago when his primary work account had been hacked and the IT department needed a backup on file. She had set it up herself, chosen the password herself, and written it on a piece of paper that was still in the top drawer of her own desk, because Carter was, for all his professional brilliance, genuinely helpless with technology. She sat down at his desk. She opened the browser. She typed in the email address and the password. The inbox loaded. There were 14 months of emails from a sender listed only as SB. Evelyn did not read them all at once. She read the first one, which was dated 14 months ago and was warm and professional and could have been innocent. She read the third one, which was warmer. She read the ninth one, which was not professional and could not have been innocent. She scrolled to the most recent, sent 4 days ago. It said, "Tuesday can't come fast enough. Suite's already booked. I've been thinking about you every minute of every terrible board meeting. Also, I think your mother suspects something. Be careful. Love you, S." There was a photo attached. Evelyn closed the browser. She sat in her husband's office chair for 11 minutes. She knew it was 11 minutes because she was watching the clock on his desk. The antique brass one his father had given him, and she counted every minute with the focused, documentary precision of a woman who had spent years in courtrooms where time was evidence. Then she picked up her phone and called her brother. James Whitfield answered on the second ring. He always answered on the second ring. It was one of his FBI habits, the ones that had never entirely left him even after he moved to private security consulting. "Ev, what's wrong?" It was not a question. It never was with James. "I need you to come to Connecticut," she said. Her voice was very steady. She would be proud of that later. "I need you to come tonight if you can. And I need you to bring your brain." A pause. "I'm on the 7 o'clock. She went downstairs and made dinner. She made Carter's favorite, roasted chicken with herbs from the garden, roasted potatoes, a green salad with the lemon dressing he liked. She set the table in the dining room. She lit the candles. She was, by the time Carter came through the door at 7:45, smelling faintly of a perfume that was not hers, completely composed. They ate dinner. Carter talked about the deal, about the London call, about his plans for the weekend after the gala. He was charming and warm and attentive in the way he sometimes was when he had been away from her for a while, as if her physical presence reminded him that he loved her. She watched him. She listened. She asked the right questions. After dinner, after Carter had gone upstairs, Evelyn cleared the table, washed the dishes by hand because the sound of it helped her think, and then she sat down at the kitchen table and waited for her brother. James arrived at 10:15. He came in through the back door with his own key, set his bag down without a word, looked at his sister's face, and said simply, "Tell me everything." She told him everything. James listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're an attorney, Ev. You know what you're entitled to. This is winnable." Evelyn almost smiled. "I know," she said. "I'm not afraid." She believed it when she said it. She had no idea yet how thoroughly, how systematically, how almost admirably she was about to be proven wrong. Carter came home the following Tuesday at 11:45 at night. Evelyn was sitting in the living room with the lights on. She had sent James to the guest room an hour earlier, not because she wanted to be alone, but because what was about to happen was between her and her husband, and whatever else she was not the kind of woman who needed a witness to her own life. Carter walked through the front door and stopped. He looked at her sitting there, calm and upright in the wing-back chair by the fireplace, and she watched his face do something she had never seen it do before. It collapsed very briefly, like a building that has had its central support removed, and then reconstructed itself into something that was trying very hard to look like a man facing a difficult conversation. He knew, immediately. She did not know how, but he knew. "Evelyn," he started. "Don't," she said. Her voice was quiet and even. "Don't do the script. I've read the emails, Carter. All 14 months of them. I know her name. I know what she calls you. I know about Suite 28 at the Carlisle. And I know about the bracelet. Every Tuesday. That's quite a dedication." He sat down heavily on the couch across from her. He put his face in his hands for a moment. Then he looked up, and she saw something she had not expected, genuine shame, not the performance of shame, the real thing. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know you are," she said. "I also know it doesn't change anything. Evelyn, if we could just talk, if we could begin. I think we should take some time apart," she said. The words landed strangely, because they were his words, the ones she had anticipated him saying, and she had decided to say them first. She watched him recognize this, watched something shift behind his eyes. "I think," he said slowly, "that's probably right." She went to bed. He slept in the guest room. In the morning, he was gone before she came downstairs again. 3 days later, Evelyn sat across from her attorney in a glass-walled conference room in Hartford and watched the woman's face do something very careful and very controlled that nevertheless communicated something catastrophic. "The prenuptial agreement," the attorney said, setting the document on the table between them, "contains a clause on page 47 that I want to walk you through very carefully." Evelyn looked at the clause. She read it twice. She had signed this agreement 8 years ago. She had read it carefully at the time. She had been an attorney. Of course she had read it. But she had been 26 and in love, and the agreement had been presented as a formality, a Hartwell family tradition, something Margaret had insisted upon, and Carter had apologized for, and which Evelyn had signed with the quiet confidence of a woman who intended to be married forever. The clause on page 47 stated that in the event of a separation initiated by either party during a pregnancy resulting from the marriage, all joint financial accounts would be frozen for a period of 90 days pending legal review. My personal accounts, Evelyn said carefully. Her attorney looked at the table. Were transferred to a joint account 14 months ago. According to the banking records, Carter initiated the transfer. You signed the authorization form. Evelyn remembered signing the form. Carter had said something about tax efficiency, about consolidating for the accountant. She had signed it on a Tuesday morning in the kitchen between her second cup of coffee and a phone call about a charity gala. She had not read it carefully. She was an attorney. She had not read it carefully. How much is in my personal accounts currently? She said. It was not really a question. Her attorney slid a single sheet of paper across the table. $342. Evelyn looked at the number. She thought about the Connecticut estate, which cost $18,000 a month to maintain. She thought about her medical bills, her OB/GYN appointments, the specialist she saw every 3 weeks. She thought about legal fees. She thought about the fact that she was 7 months pregnant and had not drawn a salary in 6 years and had $342. Whoever drafted this prenuptial agreement, her attorney said very quietly, was preparing for this specific scenario. The clause, the timing of the account consolidation, the fact that it was done 14 months ago, which corresponds with the beginning of the affair. This was not accidental, Evelyn. Evelyn sat very still. She thought about the wing-backed chair and the lights on and her own voice saying, "I'm not afraid." She thought about how certainty felt in the moment before it was taken from you. She said, "What are my options?" They talked for 2 hours. At the end of it, the picture was clear, and it was not good. She could fight the prenup, but the process would take months and require significant legal fees she did not currently have. She could request emergency interim support, but Carter's legal team had already filed a counter motion that morning, which meant Carter had known this meeting was happening, which meant someone had told him. She drove home. She sat in the driveway for a long time. Then she called Lauren. "I need to stay with you for a while," she said. "I can pay you back. Eventually." Lauren's response was immediate and absolute. "If you offer me money, I will never speak to you again. Come now. I'll make up the guest room. Bring whatever you need." Lauren's house was 12 minutes away, a warm and slightly chaotic craftsman bungalow that smelled like coffee and dog and the particular comfortable disorder of a life fully lived. She had 3 dogs, a teenage son named Cooper, who communicated primarily in shrugs, and a kitchen table that was always covered in something interesting. Evelyn arrived with 2 suitcases. Lauren opened the door, looked at her best friend's face, and said, "Come in, I made soup." Cooper appeared in the hallway, looked at Evelyn's enormous pregnant belly and her 2 suitcases, and said, "Is this a movie situation?" "Cooper," Lauren said. "What? I'm asking." "Go do your homework." "I did it. Do it again." Evelyn laughed. It was small and exhausted, and completely real. Lauren put her arms around her, carefully, making space for the baby, and held on. "Okay," Lauren said into her hair, "we're going to figure this out." She said it the way people say things they are not entirely sure of, but fully intend to make true. James arrived 2 days later, driving up from D.C. in his own car, because he had decided, without being asked, that he was staying for a while. He set up a workspace at Lauren's kitchen table, which Lauren cleared of its existing archaeology with cheerful efficiency, and within 48 hours had compiled more information about Hartwell Industries than most of Carter's own board members possessed. Evelyn sat across from him on a Thursday morning, her hands wrapped around a mug of decaf, and listened. "The Hartwell Foundation," James began, setting a printed document in front of her, donated $1.8 million to a land preservation trust in Virginia 18 months ago. The Virginia Greenway Conservation Alliance, registered nonprofit, legitimate on paper. I know about the donation, Evelyn said. Carter mentioned it at the foundation board meeting. Environmental philanthropy, good optics. The land they were preserving, James said, was sold 6 weeks later to a shell company registered in Delaware. Shell company exists, on paper only, no physical address, no employees. The assets were transferred from the shell company to a second entity registered in the Cayman Islands. Evelyn set down her mug. $22 million, James said. The foundation donated 1.8. The land sold for 22. The difference represents the appreciated value of land that had been quietly rezoned for commercial development 3 months before the donation, which means someone knew about the rezoning before it was public record, which means someone had either access to or influence over the County Planning Commission. That's fraud, Evelyn said. That is absolutely fraud, federal, because it involves a registered nonprofit and interstate financial transfers. Lauren appeared in the doorway with a plate of toast. She set it on the table, looked at the documents, and said, "Should I not be hearing this?" "You're fine," James said, taking a piece of toast without looking up. "Okay," continuing to not hear anything. She retreated to the living room. Evelyn looked at her brother. "This is Carter. This is the Hartwell family structure. Carter's name is on the foundation board, yes, but the donation was authorized by the board chair." He slid another document across the table. Margaret Hartwell. Board chair. Sole signatory authority on donations exceeding $1 million, a provision she had installed in the foundation bylaws 4 years ago. "Margaret," Evelyn said. "Margaret," James confirmed. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. She thought about her mother-in-law. The perfect posture, the cutting observations delivered with the smile of a woman who had never in her life said anything she did not intend. The way she had looked at Evelyn at the wedding, a look that Evelyn had interpreted at the time as the complex emotion of a mother releasing her son, and which she now understood with the clarity of distance as assessment, as someone calculating the dimensions of an obstacle. And then, "James, how long have you been looking at Margaret?" "Since you called me from Carter's office." She blinked. "That was 2 weeks ago." "I know. What else?" He reached into the folder and produced a single sheet of paper. It was an employment contract. Serena Blake, hired as Chief Financial Officer of Hartwell Industries 14 months ago. Standard compensation package. And at the bottom, a supplemental compensation agreement signed not by Hartwell Industries, but by Margaret Hartwell personally, paying an additional $8,000 per month directly from Margaret's private accounts, for 2 full years before Serena was hired. Evelyn read the dates 3 times. Margaret was paying Serena Blake before she worked for the company, Evelyn said, for 24 months, during which time Serena was working at a competing firm where she had access to proprietary deal flow information. The room was very quiet. She didn't just know about the affair, Evelyn said. She arranged it. James said nothing. He didn't have to. Evelyn thought about it, the architecture of it, the patience required, the cold-blooded precision of a woman who had decided her son's wife was an inconvenience and had spent 2 years engineering the solution. She had recruited Serena, had placed her, like a chess piece, into Carter's professional life, had paid her to be available, to be appealing, to be everything that Evelyn, busy managing a household and growing a baby and maintaining the gracious public life of a Hartwell wife, could not be in a given Tuesday evening. She had not stolen Evelyn's husband. She had ordered a replacement. She needed me gone, Evelyn said slowly. Not just for Carter, for the company. I never signed over board observer rights. Carter asked me 3 times in the last 4 years, and I said no, each time because it felt wrong, and I couldn't explain why. Margaret needed someone in that seat who would say yes. That's my read, James said. Lauren's voice floated in from the living room. I'm still not hearing anything, but I would like the record to reflect that this woman is a supervillain. Lauren, Evelyn said. Noted, and still not hearing it. Evelyn looked at her brother. The anger she felt was not hot. It was cold and very clean, the kind that does not make you shake, but makes you precise. She had felt it once before, in a courtroom, when opposing counsel introduced evidence she knew had been fabricated, and the anger had not rattled her. It had sharpened her. What do we do with this? She said. It was not a question. It was the beginning of a plan. James almost smiled. Now you sound like yourself. They worked until 2 in the morning. The foundation fraud, the shell company, the Cayman transfer, a pattern of conduct that, if documented correctly, constituted wire fraud, tax fraud, and potentially racketeering. They did not have everything yet, but they had enough to know where to look. Evelyn went to bed at 2:15, feeling, for the first time since the receipt in the coat pocket, like something other than a woman, things were happening to. She was wrong to feel safe. She would understand that soon. Monday began with a phone call from a blocked number. Evelyn answered it in Lauren's kitchen at 7:45 in the morning. Cooper still asleep upstairs, Lauren in the shower, James on a call in the backyard. The voice on the other end was a woman's, professional and brisk, the office of Hartwell Industries legal counsel. Calling to inform Evelyn that a petition for emergency custody determination had been filed in Hartford Family Court that morning, requesting that primary physical custody of the unborn child be awarded to Carter Hartwell, pending a formal custody evaluation. The grounds cited were Evelyn's current living situation, described in the filing as unstable and unsuitable for a newborn. The filing included photographs of Lauren's house, photographs taken from the street, within the last week. It included a sworn statement from a physician, not Evelyn's physician, a doctor whose name she did not recognize, stating that Evelyn had displayed signs of emotional instability and erratic behavior at a charity event 6 weeks ago. It included a character statement from Margaret Hartwell. Evelyn ended the call. She sat down at the kitchen table. Lauren came downstairs in a bathrobe, hair still wet, and took one look at her friend's face. What happened? Evelyn told her. Lauren sat down across from her. She did not say anything for a moment. Then, they photographed my house. Yes, they photographed my house and called it unsuitable. That appears to be the argument, yes? Lauren looked at the table. Then she looked up with an expression Evelyn had seen on her face once before, when Cooper's third-grade teacher had made a comment about his reading level that Lauren had found both inaccurate and condescending. I am going to need a moment, Lauren said, to not say what I am currently thinking. Take your time? Okay. A breath. Okay. What do we do? Before Evelyn could answer, her phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Collins, her OB-GYN, calling from her personal cell, which she had never done before. Evelyn, I need you to know something immediately. Dr. Collins' voice was controlled, but not entirely. My office received a formal records request this morning for your complete medical history, going back 6 years. The request was not made by your husband's attorneys. It was made under the signature of Margaret Hartwell, citing a provision I have never seen invoked in 20 years of practice, something about family health oversight in cases of prenatal concern. I refused the request. It was not legitimate. But Evelyn, I want you to understand what this means. They're building a case that I'm mentally unfit, Evelyn said. A pause. That is my read, yes. Evelyn thanked her and hung up. She sat very still. James came in from the backyard, looked at both of them, and said, "What?" They told him. He sat down. He was quiet for exactly 30 seconds, which for James was a long time. Then, the custody filing is designed to do two things. It creates a public record of concern about your stability, which poisons the well for any future custody proceeding, and it forces you to spend legal resources on defense rather than offense. It's a resource drain and a narrative weapon simultaneously. "I know," Evelyn said. "You need a new attorney. Today." "I know that too." She spent Tuesday on the phone. She called 4 attorneys. 2 were unavailable. One cited a conflict. The fourth, a woman named Sandra Reeves, who had been 3 years behind Evelyn at Georgetown and was now a family law partner in Hartford, agreed to take the call and, after 45 minutes, agreed to take the case. "I've seen this playbook before," Sandra said. "Not this elaborate, but the bones are familiar. They're trying to make you too busy, too scared, and too broke to be dangerous. We're going to make them regret that strategy." Evelyn felt something loosen slightly in her chest. Wednesday was the mediation. Sandra had arranged an emergency mediation session to address the custody filing, arguing that the filing was retaliatory and the grounds were fabricated. Carter's legal team had agreed to attend, which Sandra had said was a good sign, a willingness to negotiate. It was not a good sign. They arrived at the mediation center at 9 in the morning. Carter was already there, his legal team arranged around him like a wall. He met Evelyn's eyes, briefly, and then looked away, and she saw in that look something she could not entirely interpret: discomfort, guilt, the specific misery of a man who is doing something he knows is wrong and has decided to do it anyway. The first hour went as expected. Arguments, counter-arguments, the careful procedural dance of family law. During the first recess, Sandra stepped out to take the call. She came back into the room 12 minutes later. She sat down. She put her pen on the table. She said, "Evelyn, I have to withdraw from your representation. Effective immediately. I've just been informed of a conflict of interest that I was not aware of when I took the case." The room went very quiet. "What conflict?" Evelyn said. "My firm. As of 6 weeks ago, my firm has a silent investment partner." Sandra said the name. Margaret Hartwell. Evelyn looked at Carter's legal team, 3 faces carefully arranged to display nothing at all. She looked at Carter. He was staring at the table. She looked at the mediator, a gray-haired man with reading glasses, and a patient expression that was beginning to register something other than patience. She stood up. "I'll be representing myself," she said. Her voice was completely level. "I am a licensed attorney in the state of Connecticut. I would like the record to note that my former counsel has just revealed a conflict of interest arising from an undisclosed financial relationship with the opposing party's family, established 6 weeks ago. I am requesting a formal investigation into this conflict and a continuance to a new date." The mediator looked at Carter's team, then at Evelyn. Then he removed his reading glasses and set them on the table. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said slowly, "I'm going to grant the continuance." Evelyn nodded once. She picked up her folder. She walked out of the conference room, down the corridor, through the glass doors, and into the women's restroom at the end of the hall. She made it to the wall before her legs stopped working properly. She stood there, her back against the cool tile, both hands pressed flat against the surface, breathing. In, out, in. The fluorescent light hummed above her. A faucet dripped somewhere. She was 7 months pregnant. She had $342. She had no attorney. She had a custody filing against her and a medical records request and a mother-in-law who had just demonstrated that her reach extended inside the legal firms of Hartford, Connecticut. She breathed. She pushed off from the wall. She washed her hands. She went back out to the parking lot where James was waiting beside her car, having watched all of it through the glass doors with an expression so controlled it was almost frightening. She bought Sandra's firm, Evelyn said. I know. 6 weeks ago. I know. She knew we'd need a family law attorney. She preemptively bought the conflict. Ev? What? Get in the car. She got in the car. That night, she woke at 2 a.m. with contractions. The contractions were not regular. That was what she told herself as she lay in Lauren's guest room, counting the seconds between them. The familiar, focused calm of a woman who has spent 6 years managing everything, refusing to yield even now to simple panic. They were irregular. Probably Braxton Hicks. Probably stress-induced. She was a reasonable person, and she would monitor the situation, and if they became regular, she would call Dr. Collins. And there was no reason to wake anyone at 2:15 in the morning over probably Braxton Hicks contractions. By 2:47, they were 6 minutes apart. She called Dr. Collins. James drove her to the hospital. Lauren came because Lauren would not be told not to come. She put it very simply. Try to stop me. Go ahead. I'll wait. The ER at Hartford Hospital was harshly lit and smelled like industrial cleaner, and the particular anxiety of 100 waiting stories. A nurse took her back within 10 minutes, attached monitors, took her blood pressure, asked the standard questions with professional efficiency. The on-call OB came in, reviewed the readings, ordered an ultrasound. 47 minutes passed, during which Evelyn was alone in the room. She knew James and Lauren were in the waiting room. She knew they were 12 steps and a set of double doors away. But the room was very small, and the monitors were very loud, and the ultrasound screen, when the technician came in, showed her son's heartbeat in grainy black and white. 142 beats per minute, steady and completely indifferent to the chaos of his mother's life. And something about that steadiness broke something open in her. She cried, not the controlled, careful, private kind she had been managing since the receipt in the coat pocket. The ugly, voiceless kind, the kind that comes from somewhere below the part of you that manages things, the part that has been waiting patiently behind the competence and the planning and the righteous fury for its moment. The technician, a young woman named Meg, did not say anything. She handed Evelyn a box of tissues and adjusted the monitor angle so Evelyn could see the heartbeat more clearly and continued the scan with quiet, matter-of-fact kindness that Evelyn would remember for the rest of her life. The contractions slowed. By 4 a.m, they had stopped. False alarm, stress-induced. The baby was fine. She was fine. She needed to rest, reduce her stress levels. Classic advice delivered by the on-call OB with the gentle, slightly helpless look of a doctor who knows perfectly well that telling someone in crisis to reduce stress is both correct and essentially useless. Doctor. Collins arrived at 4:30, off-duty, in her coat, having been called by the on-call team as a courtesy. She sat in the chair beside Evelyn's bed, and they talked for a long time. Tell me what happened today, Dr. Collins said. Not the medical version, the real version. Evelyn told her. All of it. The mediation, Sandra, Margaret, the wall in the bathroom. Dr. Collins listened. She was a small woman in her 50s, with reading glasses she wore on a chain, and the specific, hard-won calm of someone who had sat with people in the worst moments of their lives for a long time. You need to stop carrying this alone, she said when Evelyn finished. Who in your life actually has your back? My brother, and my best friend who owns 3 insane dogs. Dr. Collins almost smiled. Then let them carry some of it. You're not failing by needing help. Evelyn, you are not weaker for being in this room right now. You are a woman under extraordinary pressure doing something physiologically extraordinary. And the fact that your body stopped you tonight was not a breakdown. It was information. Your body told you something. Are you going to listen? Evelyn was quiet for a moment. The dogs are actually very sweet, she said. Then go home to the dogs, Dr. Collins said, and get some sleep, because tomorrow you're going to need your brain. Evelyn was released at 6 in the morning. James drove home in the early light. Lauren sat in the back seat next to Evelyn, not saying anything, holding her hand. Cooper was awake when they got back, sitting at the kitchen table with cereal and his phone, and when he saw Evelyn, he put the phone down and said, "I made extra cereal, in case." It was possibly the most unexpectedly touching sentence Evelyn had heard in weeks. "Thank you, Cooper," she said. "It's the kind with blueberries," he said, going back to his phone. "You can have it." She ate the cereal. She went to sleep. She slept for 11 hours. When she woke, she lay in the afternoon light of Lauren's guest room and thought about what Dr. Collins had said, about information, and about the particular kind of clarity that comes not from intelligence or planning, but from the moments when your body overrides everything else and tells you the truth. The truth was this: she was not going to win this by defending. She had been playing defense since the receipt in the coat pocket. Reacting, responding, surviving. And every time she thought she had ground under her feet, Margaret took it away. She needed to stop defending. She needed to find the thing Margaret did not know she had. She thought about Dr. Collins. She thought about the way she had said Carter's father's name at the hospital, casually, in passing, the way you say the name of someone you have known for a long time. She thought about something. She reached for her phone. She called Dr. Collins at 8 o'clock in the morning. "I have an administrative question," she said. "About the records request you refused." "Of course," Dr. Collins said. Her voice was careful. "What would you like to know?" "The name on the request. You said it was Margaret Hartwell. Was there a physician co-signing? Someone with prescribing credentials?" "There was a Dr. William Marsh, geriatric specialist." "Thank you." Evelyn paused. "Dr. Collins, you've been Carter's family physician for a long time, 11 years. Is there anything in the public record that you think I might have overlooked?" A long pause, the kind that is not empty. "There are things I cannot tell you," Dr. Collins said carefully, "but there are things that are a matter of public record. I sometimes think people overlook obituaries. They contain a great deal of information if you read them carefully." She said nothing more. Evelyn thanked her and hung up. She searched for the obituary of Richard Hartwell, Carter's father, who had died 4 years ago. She had attended the funeral. She had stood beside Carter at the graveside and held his hand and felt genuinely sad for him, because Carter's grief had seemed genuine, had seemed like the one thing in those weeks that was entirely real. The obituary was 2 columns in the Hartford Courant. She had read it at the time. She read it again now. The 3rd paragraph mentioned a long private illness and requested memorial donations to the Connecticut Neurological Research Institute, specializing in early onset cognitive disorders. She searched Dr. William Marsh, geriatric specialist, board certified in neurology with a subspecialty in cognitive decline assessment. She called James, Carter's father, she said, before he died. "I need everything you can find about his medical situation, his mental capacity, and specifically anything related to document signings in the last 18 months of his life. James was quiet for a moment. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about the board control transfer. The moment Margaret became the sole executive decision-maker for Hartwell Industries. When exactly did that happen? I can find out. I think it happened while Richard was sick. I think it happened at a point when a neurologist might have something to say about his capacity to sign documents. Another pause. Then, give me 4 hours. He called back in 3. The board control transfer had occurred 22 months before Richard Hartwell's death, executed via a comprehensive power of attorney document that Richard had signed, granting Margaret sole executive authority over all business assets. James had contacted a trust and estates attorney in D.C. A colleague, off the record, who had reviewed the document and the timeline. Richard Hartwell, James said, was diagnosed with early-onset cognitive decline 14 months before that document was signed. His own physician at the time, now retired, made a note in Richard's file, a private file, that he had concerns about Richard's capacity for complex financial decisions. That note was never acted on, but it exists. And our attorney friend in D.C. believes that if 3 independent neurologists reviewed the timeline and the medical history, there is a substantial argument that Richard lacked legal capacity when he signed that power of attorney. Which means, Evelyn said slowly, which means Margaret's authority over Hartwell Industries is built on a document that may not be legally valid, which means the board control she has exercised for 22 months, including the foundation donations, the land deals, the fraud, all of it was executed under authority she may not have legitimately possessed. The silence stretched. She's not just a villain, Evelyn said. She's a fraudulent executive. The whole thing may constitute elder abuse, James said, which is a state crime in Connecticut, a federal offense if it involves financial exploitation across state lines, and which triggers mandatory reporting requirements for medical professionals who become aware of it. Dr. Collins, Evelyn said. Dr. Collins, James confirmed. Evelyn sat with the weight of it for a moment. It was enormous. It was also, she recognized with the cool precision of a woman who had spent years building cases, almost airtight. I need to talk to Serena Blake, she said. James went quiet. Ev? I know, but she has been in every board meeting for 14 months. She has seen everything Margaret has done. And right now, she thinks she's Carter's future. She doesn't know what Margaret does with pieces when they're no longer useful. What are you going to say to her? The truth, Evelyn said. I'm going to tell her the truth and see if she's smart enough to understand it. She had Serena's personal cell from Carter's secondary email, a number sent in a message 8 months ago with the casual intimacy of people sharing a private world. She dialed it on a Thursday afternoon. It rang 4 times. She was composing the voicemail in her head when the line clicked open. Hello? Serena's voice was cautious, controlled, the voice of someone who has been expecting an unpleasant call and has prepared for it. This is Evelyn Hartwell, Evelyn said. A silence, then. I know who you are. I imagine so. I'd like to talk to you. Not about Carter, about Margaret. Another silence, longer. Why would I talk to you about anything? Because, Evelyn said, Margaret Hartwell just began interviewing for your replacement. I have the correspondence. The candidate she's currently considering is a 29-year-old named Claire, who has a finance degree from Wharton, no prior relationship with Carter, and who will, unlike you, sign whatever Margaret puts in front of her without reading it. The silence this time was different. That's not possible, Serena said, but she said it the way people say things they have already begun to believe might be true. She did it to me, Evelyn said. She recruited you to do it. She found someone she could position. Someone ambitious, someone who would see Carter and see possibility, and she placed you precisely where she needed you. I'm not calling to hurt you. I'm calling because she's doing it again, and I think you deserve to know before she makes you expendable. How do you know about Claire? I have a very good brother. A long pause. Evelyn waited. She told me, Serena said, very quietly, that you were difficult, that Carter was miserable. She showed me emails, messages that she said Carter had sent to a friend describing the marriage. I believed them. I thought I was helping him. She wrote them herself, Evelyn said. Or had someone write them? It's consistent with her method. Another long pause. The board meetings, Serena said, and her voice had shifted, was moving towards something like resolution. She runs them through Carter. Every decision, every vote, she feeds him the language in advance. He thinks it's advice. It's dictation. And the foundation, the Virginia land donation, I raised a concern about the accounting 6 months ago. She told me the numbers were correct and suggested that I might want to focus on my core responsibilities. Would you testify to that? Yes, Serena said. Then, with something that might have been rueful, she's already replacing me. What do I have to lose? A pause. I'm sorry, Serena said, for what I did. I didn't know the whole picture. That doesn't excuse it, but it's true. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. It was not absolution, but it was not nothing. After she hung up, she sat at Lauren's kitchen table and looked at her hands. Lauren appeared from the direction of the living room with a cup of tea she hadn't asked for and a look on her face that was trying to be neutral. I wasn't listening, she said. I was in the other room reading. Lauren, I may have heard some things. Lauren, she's going to testify? It appears so. Lauren sat down. She wrapped both hands around her own mug. Character development, she said quietly. For both of us, Evelyn said. Lauren looked at her. You knew she wasn't purely the villain. I knew Margaret needed someone who would say yes. Serena just didn't know she was the weapon. How are you so calm about this? Evelyn thought about it. I'm not calm, she said. I'm clear. They're different. James came in from the backyard a few minutes later. He took one look at both of them and said, She said yes. She said yes, Evelyn confirmed. James sat down. He put his hands flat on the table. Okay, he said. Then we file everything tomorrow. They filed on a Friday morning, 3 simultaneous legal actions. Time to land before the courthouse closed for the weekend so that Carter's team would have the minimum possible time to respond before Monday. The first, a challenge to the prenuptial agreement, citing fraud in the inducement, specifically the clause on page 47, which Evelyn's new co-counsel, a trust litigation specialist James had located, argued had been deliberately obscured during the signing process and constituted a material misrepresentation. The second, a civil complaint against Margaret Hartwell personally, citing the Virginia land fraud, the elder abuse in the procurement of Richard Hartwell's power of attorney, and the deliberate interference with Evelyn's legal representation through the undisclosed purchase of Sandra Reeves's firm. The third, a formal referral to the Connecticut Attorney General's office and the Federal Department of Justice, filed by James in his capacity as a private citizen with evidence of financial crimes, including wire fraud, tax fraud, and the exploitation of a vulnerable adult. Serena's sworn affidavit was attached to all 3. The referral letter included the encrypted copies of the foundation documents, the shell company records, and the bank transfer records James had spent 2 weeks compiling. It also included the neurologist's assessment of Richard Hartwell's cognitive capacity, obtained legally from the retired physician's records through a process that had taken James 6 days and which Evelyn would not ask him to explain in detail. By Monday morning, the board of Hartwell Industries had been informed by their outside legal counsel that a federal investigation was a realistic possibility and that Margaret Hartwell's executive authority was the subject of a legal challenge. By Tuesday, 3 board members had contacted Evelyn's legal team, independently and without consulting each other, to offer cooperation. By Wednesday, Margaret's own attorney issued a statement that said, in 4 carefully constructed sentences, essentially nothing. Carter called on Wednesday evening. Evelyn almost did not answer. Then she did. "I need to tell you something," he said. He sounded like a man who had not slept in 4 days, which was probably accurate. "I didn't know about my father, about the power of attorney. She told me he agreed to everything. That it was his idea, the transition, the restructuring. I never questioned it because she's my mother, and I thought she was protecting the company for me." A long pause. "I should have questioned it." Evelyn said nothing. "I know that's not enough," Carter said. "I know I've said things that aren't enough. I just want you to know that I'm not going to fight you anymore. Whatever you need, the estate, the custody arrangement, whatever you and your attorneys say is fair, I'll sign it." "Why?" Evelyn said, not accusatory, genuinely asking. Another pause. "Because she's my mother," he said. "And she did this. And if I don't stop being her instrument, I'll spend my whole life being the thing she built instead of being my son's father." His voice cracked slightly on the last sentence. "He deserves a father, not a Hartwell piece." Evelyn thought about many things. "Shushum. Carter," she said finally, "get a therapist. A real one, not one Margaret recommends. And show up for your son. Everything else is paperwork." She hung up. Lauren was in the doorway. "How do you feel?" Lauren asked. Evelyn considered the question honestly. "Like something very heavy has been put down," she said. "And I'm not sure yet what I look like without it." "You look," Lauren said carefully, "like yourself. The Georgetown version. The federal court version." A pause. "The version that made that hedge fund guy cry." "That was a good deposition," Evelyn said. "It was a great deposition," Lauren said firmly. "Do you want soup?" "I want soup," Evelyn said. Margaret Hartwell resigned from the board of Hartwell Industries the following Monday, citing health concerns. The resignation was accepted unanimously. The Connecticut Attorney General's office opened a formal investigation. The federal referral was acknowledged by the Department of Justice in a letter that said only that the matter had been received and would be reviewed, which James said was exactly what you wanted such a letter to say. The prenuptial challenge was settled out of court within 3 weeks. Carter's attorneys, without Margaret directing them, moved efficiently and without combativeness toward resolution. The custody filing was withdrawn. The delivery was on a Tuesday. Evelyn had always known it would be a Tuesday. She did not say this to anyone because it sounded like magical thinking, and she was not a woman who indulged in magical thinking. But from the moment she had read that receipt, from the moment every Tuesday had become the organizing phrase of her undoing and then, somehow, of her rebuilding, she had known, with the irrational certainty of the body, that her son would choose a Tuesday to arrive. He did. 7 hours of labor. Dr. Collins was there. James was in the waiting room, having driven up from D.C. the night before for reasons he described as unrelated to any parental instinct whatsoever. Lauren was also in the waiting room, having brought snacks, a book she did not read, and Cooper, who sat with his phone and periodically asked if anything had happened yet. Oliver Richard Hartwell was born at 4:52 in the afternoon. 6 pounds, 11 ounces. A full head of dark hair. A face that was still doing the preliminary work of deciding what face it intended to be, the way newborns have. That particular liquid, unformed quality of someone who has just arrived and is still loading. He was the most beautiful thing Evelyn had ever seen. She lay in the hospital bed, Oliver on her chest, both of them doing the essential, ancient, wordless work of the first hour, and she understood with a simplicity that bypassed all the language she had spent her life accumulating that everything that had happened had led exactly here, and that here was correct. Carter came in at 6 o'clock. He had called ahead, which she appreciated. He came in quietly, without the legal team, without the performance of fatherhood. He came into the way you enter a space that you are not sure you have the right to enter, and he stood at the foot of the bed and looked at his son. His face did something uncomplicated and real. "He's perfect," he said. His voice was low and slightly wrecked. "Yes," Evelyn said. "He is." Carter looked at her then. The look between them held everything: the damage, the loss, the long, strange road of the past months, and somewhere, underneath all of it, a new thing, fragile and not yet named, that was not love and not forgiveness, but was something workable. Something that could, with time and intention and the binding fact of a shared child, become a kind of partnership. "I'm going to do better," he said. "I know that doesn't fix anything." "No," she said. "But it's a place to start." He stayed for 20 minutes. He held Oliver for 7 of them, standing very still, the way large people hold newborns, with a careful, total concentration. Then he handed Oliver back, said good night to both of them, and left. The door closed. Evelyn looked down at her son. Oliver looked, with the unfocused, exploratory attention of the newborn, in the approximate direction of her face. "Hello," she said. "I'm your mother. I want to tell you a few things while you're too young to argue with me." Oliver made a small sound. "First, you come from complicated people, on both sides. Complicated is not the same as bad. Complicated means you'll have more to understand, and understanding things is a gift, even when it hurts." Oliver shifted slightly. "Second, the person who loves you most in any room is usually the quietest one. Pay attention to the quiet people." A small fist uncurled and then curled again. "Third, she paused. This one was harder. "I spent a lot of years making myself smaller to fit into a life that was built for someone else's comfort. I'm not going to tell you not to love people. Love people completely, but know who you are before you give yourself away. Know what you're worth. Know that you are not a piece to be placed. You are the player." Oliver appeared to consider this. The door opened, and Lauren appeared, having apparently reached the limit of her patience in the waiting room, which she had described to a nurse as more of a guideline than a rule. She came in and looked at Oliver with an expression of total, unguarded delight. "Oh," she said. "Oh, he's wonderful. Evelyn, he has your forehead." "He has Carter's chin," Evelyn said. "The forehead is better," Lauren said firmly. She sat down in the chair beside the bed and leaned forward to look more closely. "Hi, Oliver. I'm going to be your unofficial aunt. I have 3 dogs. You're going to love them. 2 of them are extremely well behaved, and 1 of them is a chaos agent, but we love him anyway because character is built through adversity." "Lauren," Evelyn said, "I'm preparing him for life. He's 2 hours old. Early education is important." James appeared in the doorway behind her. He looked at the baby with the expression of a man who has decided to feel nothing and is failing comprehensively. "He's healthy?" he asked. "Perfectly," Evelyn said. James nodded. He came in and stood for a moment, looking at his nephew with the careful, private intensity he brought to everything. Then he reached out one careful finger and touched the baby's hand, and Oliver's hand closed around it with the reflexive, total grip of the newborn. the grip that does not know yet about uncertainty or loss or the long, complicated road of being alive. James looked at his sister over the top of his nephew's head. "You did good, Ev," he said. She thought about the nursery floor, the $342, the bathroom wall in the mediation center, the hospital at 2 in the morning. She thought about Margaret and the prenup, and the attorney who had resigned, and the board that had folded, and the woman who had, against every assembled resource of a powerful family, simply refused to stop. "We did good," she said. Cooper appeared in the doorway. He looked at the baby. He looked at his mother, who was obviously about to cry. He looked at James, who was still standing with his finger held by a 6-pound, 11-ounce person. "So," Cooper said, "is this the part where everything works out?" "This is the part where everything starts," Evelyn said. Cooper considered this. "That's more accurate," he said, in the tone of someone who takes information seriously. "Also, I named one of Mom's dogs Oliver last week, so this is kind of awkward." "Cooper," Lauren said. "To be fair, I didn't know." "We will rename the dog," Lauren said firmly. "What if the dog has already bonded with the name?" "Cooper, I'm just raising the dog's perspective." Oliver made a small, definitive sound that might have been, in the charitable interpretation of his mother, laughter. It might have simply been a sound that newborns make. But Evelyn chose to interpret it as laughter because she was his mother and she had earned the right to choose. She looked at her son. She thought about what she had said to him in the quiet first hour, about knowing your worth, about being the player. She thought about the woman she had been in the nursery at the beginning, the one who had pressed her hand against the safe green wall and told a baby everything would be okay without knowing what okay would require. She had been right. She had simply underestimated the cost. And she had underestimated herself. 6 months later, she went back to law, not to a firm. She opened her own practice, a small one, 3 attorneys, including herself, working exclusively on cases involving financial fraud, elder abuse, and marital asset concealment. James handled investigative work on a consulting basis. The caseload built quickly. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. Oliver grew with the determined, enthusiastic efficiency of someone with a great deal of living to do. He had Carter's chin and Evelyn's forehead and Lauren's opinion of himself, which was to say, very high. He was easy with people and stubborn about naps and utterly fearless, which his mother thought was both wonderful and genuinely terrifying. Carter was, in his life, consistently, carefully, and increasingly genuinely. The therapist he had hired was, by his own account, rigorous and unimpressed by Hartwell-style deflection, which Carter said with something that sounded almost like gratitude. He showed up for Oliver's milestones. He was learning, slowly, the difference between performing fatherhood and practicing it. Margaret's legal situation resolved slowly, the way large institutional failures do, in documents and settlements and the gradual dismantling of structures built over decades. She was not imprisoned. She was, in the end, diminished, which was perhaps more accurate. Serena Blake moved to Chicago. She sent a card when Oliver was born. It said, "Congratulations, and I mean it." Evelyn put it in Oliver's baby book. She was not entirely sure why. Perhaps because the story of his life should include all of its honest pieces, including the ones that were complicated. On the first Tuesday of March, 8 months after Oliver was born, Evelyn sat in her new office on the 6th floor of a building in Hartford, looked out the window at the early spring beginning to suggest itself in the trees, and thought about everything that word now meant to her. Not every Tuesday at the Carlisle, every Tuesday she had spent rebuilding, every Tuesday she had shown up, every Tuesday she had been, in some small or large way, more herself than she had been the Tuesday before. Her assistant knocked. "Your 9 o'clock is here. Send them in," she said. She turned from the window. She had work to do. Closing editorial note. The content of this story, including its characters, narrative arc, emotional themes, and dramatic structure, was researched, developed, and manually edited by our creative team with the sole purpose of delivering meaning, emotional resonance, and genuine life lessons to our audience. Every scene was crafted with intention. Every character was built with care. We believe that the stories we choose to tell shape the way we see ourselves and each other, and we take that responsibility seriously. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of a community that values stories that actually mean something